Hello and welcome to this lecture series on microprocessor and microcontroller, and currently we are studying 8086 microprocessor. This is the 17th video lecture in this series and 7th video lecture for 8086 microprocessor. Up till now what we have done is we have studied some fundamentals of programming in 8086 microprocessor. We have also seen the architecture part and the pin diagram of 8086 microprocessor. Now, the next important task is we have already discussed this while discussing the pin diagram that 8086 microprocessor can operate in two modes. Those two modes were single processor mode and multiprocessor mode. In single processor mode, you only need a microprocessor together with its peripherals to achieve a certain task, right? Similarly, in multiprocessor mode, you will be needing various microprocessors connected with their own peripherals and they work as a single system. Where is this useful? For example, we have discussed that 8086 is a general purpose microprocessor, but 8087 is its arithmetic coprocessor, because in 8086, if you will see the complete instruction set, you will have simple instructions for addition, multiplication, division, subtraction, and maybe some shift operations, etc. But its instruction set is not very rich. It cannot directly perform the instructions like log of some value, sine of some value. So in that case, we have a dedicated arithmetic coprocessor, which is called as 8087. So when we assemble a complete computer system, we might have this arithmetic coprocessor into our system if we want to perform high-end mathematical operations. So multiprocessor mode is also useful, and it is not necessary that there are only 8086 microprocessors in multiple numbers in multi-mode operations. So there could be different kind of processors. Some of them may be dedicated to some purpose like 8087, which is dedicated for your mathematical operations. There could be some microprocessors which will be dealing with some other tasks and so on and so forth. So that's why multiprocessor mode is also useful. But here in this lecture, we are going to discuss the single processor mode, which is called as minimum mode configuration, right? So in this minimum mode configuration, we will have this one 8086 microprocessor and we will interface it with its peripheral so that it becomes a complete computer system, which is technically called as microcomputer. So a microcomputer, it is a device which has a microprocessor and its peripherals. These microprocessor and its peripherals, they are not necessarily interfaced on the same chip, right? Had it been a microcontroller, inside a microcontroller, the microprocessor as well as its peripheral, they are interfaced on the same chip. So microcontroller is a complete system in itself. You don't need to interface anything externally to the microprocessor to be able to operate. However, microprocessor is just brain of the computer. So with brain, you have to interface its peripheral so that the complete system can work. So in that case, when all the peripherals are interfaced with this microprocessor, it becomes a microcomputer system. So that's what we are trying to do today. And in layman's language, when you go to a shop for purchasing a desktop computer, you definitely specify that I will be needing this much of RAM, I will be needing this processor, and so on and so forth. So that's the process of assembling. So that's what we are going to do. We are going to assemble a computer system today, and the processor there will be 8086. There will be a single processor together with its peripheral, and that's what we mean by minimum mode configuration. So that's what we are going to study today, right? So before beginning, let me just tell you what we studied in the earlier classes regarding this microprocessor. We have already covered this architecture portion. Then we have covered the pin diagram portion also. And this is little important. So let me just elaborate a little bit here also. So this was the architecture portion which we have studied. And the difference from 8085 microprocessor was that we have a separate bus interface unit as well as execution unit. And due to this instruction queue, these two units could operate independently, and that's what we mean by pipelining. So this was the point that we highlighted here. Then we moved on to the pin diagram. Inside the pin diagram, we saw that some pins, they had multiple meanings. So you can see that pins which start from 31 to the pins that end at 24. These pins, they have these two meanings, and they are in context of minimum mode as well as maximum mode. So some pins will behave in a different way when you assemble a minimum mode system, and they will behave in a alternate way when you assemble your system in a maximum mode. So today we are going to see minimum mode operation. So we will be dealing with pins like hold, HLDA, write bar, memory slash input output bar, data transmit or receive bar, then data enable bar, and then address latch enable and interrupt enable bar. So all of these pins will be used in today's configuration, which is minimum mode configuration, right? So rest of the means the alternate meaning of these pins will be applicable in maximum mode configuration. So that's what I wanted to point out through these slides. And we should also remember that we have read the status bits of this microprocessor. There are some status pins. So you can see this S3, S4, S5, S6, S7, and these are the status pins which are applicable to both of the modes. So it's not that this A16 to A19 they have got these two meanings. So one is for maximum mode or another is for minimum mode. No. So these meanings they will be used in maximum as well as minimum modes. Only the points that are written in small brackets they will be applicable for minimum mode, and rest everything will remain the same in both of the modes. So for S3 and S4 we said that to be able to select particular segments in the externally interfaced memory, these are the statuses. So this S3 and S4 status pins, it simply means that. After that, we studied this BHE bar and A naught pin, right? So A naught is your simply this one AD naught. So it is a multiplexed pin which contains the lowest significant bit of address as well as data. So when it is interpreted as address, it is called as A naught. So with this thing and your BHE bar signal, which is coupled with this S7 status bit. However, S7 is not used at all because it is actually a spare bit. So this is only BHE bar. So coupled with this BHE bar and A naught, this combination can be used to see whether we are trying to write 1 byte or 2 bytes and simultaneously or in alternate fashion. So this table is used for that. So this S3, S4 together with your this BHE bar and this AD naught pin, this will be used for statuses. I'm telling you all this, I'm revising this all because this will be helpful for timing diagrams that we are going to study today, right? After that, we also saw this S0, S1 and S2 pins, but however, you see that this S0, S1 and S2 pin, they are used in maximum mode. So they will not be applicable for today's class because we are essentially studying the minimum mode configuration, right? And after that, this QS0 and QS1 will tell us the status of this queue that we have got, but still this QS1 and QS0 is applicable for maximum mode. So this will also not be applicable for today's class, right? So this was what we studied in context of architecture and pin diagram. And in today's class, what we are going to do is, let me just first give you a brief overview of how we are going to study this complete minimum mode. So first of all, we will study what are the basic components which are required to start a microprocessor. So definitely there is this 8284 clock generator signal, because once a clock has been interfaced to microprocessor together with the power supply, then the microprocessor will start its operation, right? So it will come into a conscious state. Conscious state is a little bit different word, but you can say that the microprocessor will start, right? If it has its peripherals, it will start interacting with them. So this is the minimum thing that we need. We need at least a clock generator IC, right? So I will elaborate. Okay. So I will also elaborate on the internal structure of this clock, because some of you were asking the questions that, sir, why this signal is level triggered or edge triggered. So to be able to see that it's actually a hardware constraint, I will elaborate the diagram of this clock generator. We will see how this IC is internally built and so on and so forth. Then we will move on to this minimum mode configuration. You have this 8086 microprocessor, and to be able to start a microprocessor, you simply need a clock. So this clock is there, and after that, you have to interface some externally interfaced devices. So these devices will help you to latch the address, and maybe you will have a transceiver which will be coupled with the data bus to receive some data from the external peripherals, etc. So this is a basic minimum things that you need your microprocessor to start, right? After that we will be seeing this diagram where you have a clock which is interfaced with microprocessor. Then you have latches for address latching and transceiver buffer is also there. Then you have some decoder circuit, and then you have externally interfaced memory, RAM and ROM. So you have these two kinds of memories in your system when you actually purchase a system. So you specifically give attention to how much RAM is there in your computer, and ROM is, of course, ROM should be there, which will hold some predefined programs, etc. So ROM is also an essential part. So RAM, ROM are necessary, right? And some input-output devices should be there. So how this complete system is assembled, we will see together with the timing diagrams. So we will also see the timing diagrams here for read and write cycle and hold acknowledge cycle, right? So that's what we are going to do. So let me just start with this slide, where what we are going to do is, first of all, we will see you have this microprocessor, and you have got this IC 8284 clock generator, which we have also discussed earlier in brief, but today we are going to discuss it in detail. So this is a clock generator circuit, right? And what signals are there in which we are interested? So you see, first of all, in this clock generator circuit, there is a crystal oscillator which is attached in the pins X1 and X2, between the pins X1 and X2. So this clock generator, this crystal oscillator, will actually generate a square wave which will be connected to X1 and X2 inputs of this IC, right? So one of the questions that you might directly ask, that you have inside this 8086 microprocessor, okay, I have also written 8086 or 8088. So whatever we discuss for 8086, it is also applicable to 8088, but the only point is 8086 is a 16-bit microprocessor and 8088 is a 8-bit microprocessor. So its data bus is not of 16 bits, rest everything is same. So whatever we are discussing for 8086, it is also applicable to 8088 microprocessor, right? So one of the questions that one might ask is, you have a crystal oscillator which is generating a perfect square wave. So why are you interfacing it to this 8284 clock generator, and then you are supplying it through this clock output pin to this particular input of the microprocessor? So you could have directly applied this crystal oscillator here, which would have been fine. But then today you will see that it is actually necessary for us to use this 8284 clock generator, because this crystal oscillator, it is not only used by this 8086 microprocessor, it is also used by other devices in the system, because you have this microprocessor, together with it there are its peripherals, right? So those peripherals, especially the input output devices that you have, they also might need some clock, and that clock might be not clocked at the same frequency as this crystal oscillator is. So we need to clock it at a lower frequency, because it might be that your input output device is slower as compared to this microprocessor. So for that purpose, this 8284 clock generator IC is used. And as far as this 8086 IC is concerned, we are mainly looking for these four outputs. First is the clock signal. So obviously we have to have a clock signal in our microprocessor. Then this IC also generates ready and reset signals. So these ready and reset signals are also generated by 8284 clock generator. So whenever you press the reset button, in your computer will restart, right? So that is something which will be given by this clock IC only. So this reset signal will be given by this clock IC to the microprocessor, right? Then you have got this peripheral clock, PCLK. Peripheral clock is also there, and it has got its separate output. So this will be connected to the peripherals which will be interacting with the microprocessor. And you will soon see when we will study the internal structure of this, that this peripheral clock is fairly slower as compared to this X1, X2 uh, crystal frequency that we have attached here. So this peripheral clock output is also there. So we are mainly interested in these four signals. Then this EFI input is for external frequency input. I mean, to be able to operate this microprocessor, either you can use this crystal oscillator, or you can enable this signal such that the externally applied frequency will be used for this particular microprocessor instead of this crystal oscillator. So this EFI is the pin where you apply that particular signal, right? Then we will see what is the meaning of all of these things just after this slide. So let me just bring out the structure or the internal structure of this 8284 clock generator so that we can answer some simple questions which you had in your mind in the previous lectures. So this is the internal architecture of this 8284 clock generator. So you can see that we are mainly interested in this reset signal. Then this is oscillator signal, which is the output for clock. Then this is PCLK, which is for peripheral clock. Then this is the clock output, and this is the ready output, right? So let me first tell you how you will be using this crystal oscillator or an externally applied frequency EFI signal, right? So you see here this crystal oscillator will be connected between x1 and x2, and together with it you have got this AND gate. This AND gate is connected to this F slash C bar pin, right? So when this F slash C bar pin is 1, in that case you will see that you have got a NOT gate here. So obviously this will be 0 and the output of AND gate will be 0, whatever is the crystal oscillator applied here. So in that case, if when F slash C bar has a value of 1, then this crystal oscillator will not be used. But you can see that F slash C bar is 1. That means this AND gate will be activated, and whatever is the external frequency input, it will be applied here, right? So here you will be getting the actual output of the selection which you have made between the crystal oscillator and the external frequency input. So out of these two, this output will be available here, and this will be used as the clock signal for driving various things, right? So this is the selection between crystal oscillator and the external frequency input. Now, another thing is you can see that if you want to reset your microprocessor, you have to apply a reset signal, not at the pin of the microprocessor, but at the pin of the 8284 clock generator, right? So if you will make this signal high, there is a buffer which is kept here, buffer as well as Smith trigger. So this thing is a Smith trigger plus buffer. So now this will appropriately make this on, right? This is a D flip-flop, simple D flip-flop. You are all aware of how a D flip-flop performs. And if you see this circuit of D flip-flop, it will be triggered at the negative pulse. It will be triggered at the negative pulse. Means when we will make a transition from 1 to 0, in only that case this D flip-flop can be triggered and this reset signal can be activated. So that is true, but microprocessor 8086 is such that it will sample this output. It will look for this reset output at the positive edge of the clock. I mean, when the positive edge of the clock comes, when you make a transition from 0 to 1, in that case, it will sample this output. So, this D flip-flop will be triggered when we actually have a negative going pulse from 0 to 1, but microprocessor will look for it when it goes from 1 to 0. So in that case, this is a suitable thing that we have here. And that is why some signals are edge triggered and some signals are level triggered, because the kind of flip-flops that we use, they will actually decide which signal will be edge triggered and which signal will be level triggered for a microprocessor. So you can essentially see that it is actually a hardware constraint. Since D flip-flop is used, that's why we have to have edge triggered signals only, right? So this is for your reset part. And then after that, you can see that the output of crystal oscillator is also directly available, but we won't be using this to feed in our microprocessor. We will be using this clock signal, right? The CLK signal will be used, and you can see that this also comes from the same place. The CLK signal, this will be fed into the microprocessor. Now, another thing is you can see that there is this +3 and +2 counter. I mean, you have got this +3 sync and +2 sync. So you have got this crystal oscillator, and you have if you see that these two counters are in series, so 3 into 2 will be 6. So it will be a divide by 6 counter in total. This is individually a divide by 3 counter, this is individually a divide by 2 counter. So when these two are combined in series, then their series combination will make it a divide by 6 counter. And you, the peripheral clock that you have got, it will be having that much division. I mean, it will be a divide by 6 signal. So whatever crystal oscillator you apply here, that will be a divide by 6 counter that you get here, right? So this divide by 6 counter will be there, and it will be supplied to the peripherals, because peripherals are usually slower as compared to the microprocessor. So you have got this divide by 6 counter, right? And this will be used for today's lecture also. However, if you want to work in maximum mode, what will happen is there are other processors in the system also. Some processors might be slower, some processors might not be that slower, they will be little less slower, and some processors will be working at par with 8086. I mean, they will be working at the same frequency at which 8086 works. So, what happens is we have got this divide by 3 counter, divide by 2 counter. So, you can see that you have got these outputs as C-sync signal. So this is used for synchronizing the external processors that you have together with 8086 in your system. However, when you are using it in minimum mode, then this C-sync signal will be definitely grounded. So that is not used for minimum mode. However, when we will discuss maximum mode, you will see that the C-sync system is being C-sync signal is being used there. So that is for essentially maximum mode of operation. Now, you also see this small circuitry here. This small circuitry is for, you can see that there is this AE and one signal and address enabled two signals. So these are the two signals, and when the externally interfaced devices are there which are ready to transfer some data, etc. So in that case, this ready signal will be applied. Ready signal will be applied as one there, and if this clock is ready to take that input, so you have to use this AEN1 and AEN2 signal, right? So this is an activator for that, and correspondingly you have got the output here, right? So this is used for synchronization of that thing, and you can see that this complete circuit that you see here, which involves these two flip-flops, is a divide by 4 counter. So this was divide by 3, this was divide by 2, and here they have elaborated that circuit, and this is called as divide by 4 counter. So this ready signal, it is drawn from this divide by 4 counter circuitry. So you can already see that whatever frequency you apply to this microprocessor through this crystal oscillator is not directly used. Your peripheral clock, it will be requiring a divide by 6 counters frequency. Your clock is at the same frequency which this crystal oscillator has. Ready will have a frequency of divide by 4. So on and so forth. That is why we do not apply this crystal oscillator directly to your microprocessor. We will be using this 8284 clock generator here, right? So this is a brief description of why we have some signals which are edge triggered, because we have got a D flip-flop. If you have some level triggered signal, then you might have a flip-flop in the circuit which is not D flip-flop, but a flip-flop which can be level triggered. So you can have, so these are constraints which essentially come from that flip-flops that you are using, right? So now let us come back to the assembling of our system. This is our 8086 microprocessor. We have put our clock, and you can see that C-sync, AEN1, AEN2, F/C is already grounded because we are essentially having this crystal oscillator and we want to use it. This EFI signal has no meaning here because ultimately F/C signal is grounded here. So this clock is of use, ready signal is of use, and now we know that ready signal is not at same frequency as this crystal oscillator. It is at divide by 4. Then the reset signal is also there, which is connected through a split trigger and then a D flip flop, and that is why it is the edge triggered signal. So now we have the reason for that also. And this PCLK is also there, which is having a divide by 6 frequency as compared to this crystal oscillator. So this is how we have interfaced a clock. Now let us interface some more elements to this system. So this is again our microprocessor. This is a clock which is interfaced here, and this plus VCC is also applied to this microprocessor, and this is the pin minimum slash maximum bar. Now you see that plus VCC will be applied at the appropriate pin where the power supply is needed. Together with that, it has also been applied to this min slash max bar pin. And you can see that plus VCC means a high voltage or high logic level value. So if it is high, it is operating in the minimum mode, not in the maximum mode. So this pin also has to be made plus 1, right? Means logic level 1. So that is why this microprocessor now operates in minimum mode. In the maximum mode, we will see that we will ground this particular pin. Now, after that, what do we need? Now, once the microprocessor has a clock, we now need to have an address latch. And we know that in 8086 microprocessor, the address is definitely of 20 bits, but the latches that we have, they come in 8-bit fashion. So we will be needing 3 address latches, and that is why you can see that there are three slices of memory that you can see. Individual slice is of 8 bits, that is, it can store a 1 byte data, and since the address is completely of 20 bits, so you will be needing three slices. Three slices will have 24 bits, out of which only 20 bits will be used for address lines. And the name of this IC is Intel 8282 address latch. So this will be latching your addresses, right? And this address latch is always enabled, so we have just made its OE bar pin. This OE bar will be a enable pin, and this is always enabled, so we have already grounded it, right? So what inputs does this address latch takes? So you can see that it takes the address latch enable signal first. I mean, this latch will be latching the addresses seeing this status of ALE pin. So this ALE pin, if it is high, it will be using this address bus that you see here to latch its value into itself, right? So this ALE pin is required here. Then you need to have the address buses here completely, and you also need the status of this BHE bar pin, because we discussed this BHE bar pin when we said that we will be having odd and even memory banks here. So finally, this BHE bar pin will be used with the address bus to be able to select a particular memory chip. So the output of this 8282 address latch is BHE bar pin as well as the complete address bus, which is of 20 bits, right? So you can see that it has taken A19 to A16 as well as AD0 to AD15. The complete address bus has been taken, and whenever this ALE signal is activated, which we will see in the clock diagram or the timing diagram, that in the T1 state, this ALE signal will be enabled and the addresses will be latched during that particular state. So this address bus will be delivering us that even after T1, because after T1 in T2, this address bus can contain something else. It might contain some data in T2, T3, and T4 states. So for this purpose, we are using this 8282 address latch. You might also see the internal structure of this 8282 latch, but it is a simple storage device. So it is essentially made up of D flip-flops. So that's why I'm not elaborating the internal structure of this 8282 address latch. If you're interested, you can see it in your textbook. Now, another important thing is this 8286 transceiver. Now, you can see that there are two chips used. So definitely this is of 16 bits, and you can see that the data bus has been connected. AD0 to AD15. This is the data bus. 16 bits of the data bus of microprocessor has been connected to this transceiver IC. So what is the usage of this? First of all, this 8286 transceiver is an optional device. You may or may not have it in your computer system. But what happens is when you're assembling a computer, when you assemble a computer, this address lines, they are connected to various devices. They are not only connected to sorry, not the address lines, the data lines. The data lines are connected to various devices. They are not only connected to the external memory, but they might be connected to the input output devices. They might be connected to something else also in the system. So what happens is you might be aware of this fact from your digital logic course, that as the logic 1 level travels onto a wire, because of the length of the wire, and because of the propagation of that logic 1 level onto that wire, it might sometimes become 0. So that is why we need some signal boosters somewhere, right? So this transceiver 8286 IC is actually nothing. It acts like it acts like that booster only. What happens is whatever signals you are receiving on AD0 to AD15, that is the data bus on these particular lines. Suppose you have sent a logic 1 value from here, right? And logic 1 corresponds to +5 signal. Because of traveling on this particular address lines, I mean this actual physical wires, this +5 might become 4.5. So to be able to boost those signals so that to whatever devices they are available, you will be receiving a +5 value, this transceiver IC is used, right? So for that purpose, it can be used, or otherwise, optionally, you can also connect this data bus directly to your externally interfaced memory and devices, but that's not suggested. This is an optional device, but more or less it is used frequently. And the enable pin for this is DEN, data enable. So this is passed to the activator signal of this particular IC, and data, whether you want to transmit it or receive it, for that you have to give it one input. So this DEN will decide whether this IC is active or not active in a particular mode of operation. Now, another important point to note here is that not all the ICs that you see, I mean, there are these two ICs, they are connected to this microprocessor, and they won't be activated 100% of the time. For example, if you see this IC, the activator pin of this has been grounded. It is an active low pin, so this will remain active for 100% of the times. But if you see this IC, the activation will be decided by this pin. Because what happens is, if you keep this activated for every time, so what will happen is this data bus and address bus will keep on changing their content, and those changes will also be reflected here. So the data bus that you see here will sometimes contain data, sometimes it will contain address. So it should not happen. That is why we have this activator signal, which is called as data enable, and it should be connected to the activation signal of this particular IC that you see here, or this memory, or this chip that you see here, right? So this is the description of that. And of course, in the minimum mode of operation, as we have discussed, we will be having all these signals: memory slash input output bar, write, read, hold, acknowledge, then interrupt signal and interrupt acknowledgement signal. So this is what we mean by control bus. It is not actual a single entity, but it is a combination of various signals. So all of the pins that you see here are not drawn in order of their appearance as their hardware IC is seen. They are drawn in some logical order. So I have grouped all the control signals together and I have called them a control bus. So this is the basic minimum configuration that you need to start a microprocessor. You have a clock, you have a microprocessor, you have address latch, you have transceiver, you have a control bus. Now what? Now what? Do we need something else to be able to run this microprocessor? Yes, we of course need a externally interfaced memory. We of course need a externally interfaced memory, right? So let me just show you that diagram. So the diagram that I have shown you here is on the left half of this particular page, where you have this microprocessor, clock generator, then you have these latches. Three latches will be used for 8086 system, two latches will be used for 8088 system. So this 2 is written for 8088. We are not bothered about that. We only care about this 3 because in 8086, if you see, we have got 20-bit address lines. So there we have to use these three ICs, right? So this is there. Similarly for transceiver, as I told you that 8086 is having a 16-bit data bus. However, 8088 will be having a 8-bit data bus. So for 8088, we only require one IC, and if it is 8086, we have to use these two ICs. So since we are dealing with 8086 now, so we have to have both of these ICs, right? So after that, we have interfaced these memory. Now let's have a look at these memory segments and also have a look at how the address decoding portion takes place. So this is your basic computer system. This is a complete microcomputer which has been generated by using 8086 microprocessor. So you can see that you have got this EPROM here. These two sets of EPROMs are here. Then there are two sets of RAMs, and then there is this input output device, right? So let us first see how they are connected. We already know the logic for even and odd memory banks. So for EPROM, you have two chips. One of them is odd, one of them is even. And similarly for RAM, you have an odd bank and even bank. And we have already known why we separate it into even and ordered banks. And the reason for that is primarily because we would like to keep a 16-bit word in one go into the externally interfaced memory, and that is why we are just using this odd and even order bank, right? Then you have these input output devices here which are connected. So let us see how they are connected. So if you see here, from this particular IC set, that is these three IC sets, this will give you the address line. So A0 to A19, complete 20 bits of addresses have been connected to these four ICs, right? They seem to be have been connected to all of these four ICs, but not all of them will be used for all of these four ICs, because we saw that when we want to access this odd memory bank or even memory bank, we have to generate certain chip select signals. So we will study in a while how those chip signals are selected, and accordingly the appropriate address lines will be used. Not complete A0 to A19 lines will be used for every chip, but however they are connected to every chip. So it will all depend upon the chip select signal, which you see here CS bar, and you can see that inside the chip select signal there is an empty wire that you have got here. So this empty wire will be used with this particular logic. So I will discuss that in a while. So the chip select signal will actually decide which address lines are to be used. However, every address line is available to every memory chip, right? And it will be decided based on the fact of BHE bar signal, the BHE bar signal that you have received from the output of this particular IC. So I will further show you that diagram where you can see that there is this BHE bar signal. So in combination with this BHE bar and A naught, in the beginning of this lecture, I have just given you a revision of the tables for the status signals. So BHE bar and A naught signal will completely decide which memory bank has to be selected and whether we are trying to write a even word or a odd word. So let me just show you that slide again so that things will become more clear. Um, yeah, so this is that slide with this BHE bar signal and A naught signal. You can see that you can write a whole word from and to even address, upper byte from and to odd address, lower byte from and to even address, and none. So by seeing this BHE bar and A naught, you can actually just design the chip select signal for these chips that you see here, these memory chips that you see here. So your address line is given here, address line is given here, then the memory signal is given here, memory slash input output bar signal is given here, and these two decoders will be telling you whether you are trying to deal with externally interfaced memory or you are trying to deal with the externally interfaced input output devices, because the four chips that you see here are memory chips and one chip is used for input output devices. So which one, whether you want to deal with these four chips or with this input output device, it will be decided with by using this decoder. Once you have decided that you are using the memory chip, then in conjunction with one of the signals that you will get as an output from this particular set of chips, which is BHE bar, and this A naught of this address bus completely, you will be selecting even and odd banks, right? So that you can write a particular word inside the memory, or you can write even or odd byte of the memory in the appropriate cycles, right? So for in that way, these things have been connected here. There is also this input output device, and you can see that the control signals, I have shown them on the upper side. So this memory slash IO bar, interrupt acknowledge signal, read and write, they are also there, and they are also connected to these memory chips. So whenever through programming inside this microprocessor, these signals will be activated, appropriate operations can be initialized. So this is one of the very first computer systems that we had in world, although the first one was 4004 microprocessor, but a successor to that is this particular system, which acted as the blueprint of the current version of computers that we have. If you see the Intel series, we have got Pentium series, then we have got this Core i3, then i5, i7, now i9 also. So they all work on this particular blueprint. So in one of the lectures, I will discuss that system which we are using today is not very different from this kind of things, right? So these input output devices in our cases now are keyboard and your screen on which you see the output, and you can decide the size of the RAM that you want to have on your computer. And now you can also make a guess that you can also change your RAM. There are various slots of RAM which are given on your motherboard, and you can increase or decrease the size of your RAM. So here we have used the complete address capability, so we have used some RAM here, but however you can also use some less RAM here. It's not necessary that you completely exhaust the 20-bit addressing capability of this microprocessor. You can use some less RAM also there, right? So this is how a computer system is assembled here, right? Now let us see the timing diagrams, how timing operations etc happen inside this microprocessor 8086. So let us discuss this read cycle, input or the read operation, when you are trying to read something from the externally interfaced memory inside this microprocessor. Means what is happening is there is some data which is stored in either RAM or ROM of this microprocessor. Let us say RAM. The RAM has got certain data, and we want that data to be imported inside microprocessor. So what all operations will happen? Let us pay some attention to the read cycle. If the read cycle is clear to you, then write cycle will obviously become very clear to you, because this write cycle is nothing but it is the read. It is similar to read cycle. Only the write signal has to be modified. And then we will pay some attention to hold and hold acknowledge signals when some external bus master is trying to take the control of the internal buses of the microprocessor, right? So let me begin by this read cycle only. And a typical instruction inside 8086 will have at least four T states: T1, T2, T3, and T4. So not all of the instructions are supposed to follow this procedure, but most of the instructions, because most of the instructions will be dealing with read or write the external memory or the input output. So these operations will typically have four T states, right? So this is called as one bus cycle. So these are four T states are there. So this is a typical scenario, right? I mean, in almost every instruction you will see this. So let us discuss what happens in T1 state, right? So first of all, let me show you uh, a general procedure that happens in these four states. So if you talk about the T1 state, in the T1 state, what will happen is address latch enable signal has to be enabled, because when any instruction begins, what happens is you will be first trying to read the externally interfaced memory, right? For reading its code segment, maybe. So for that, you have to enable the address latch enable signal, because you will be supplying an address. I mean, you want to start reading your externally interfaced memory from this particular location. So the first task that we have to do is we have to enable this address latch enable signal, so that whatever addresses has been provided, it will be latched by the address latch that I have just shown you. 8282 address latch will be there, and the address will be latched there. So in T1, these two things, and after that in the T2 state, the address signals are lowered, not lowers. The spelling is incorrect. The address signals are lowered. This happens in T2 state. I mean, address latch enable, since the addresses have been latched in 8282 IC, so you do not need addresses now on the address bus. Now it has to be treated as data bus. So these address signals are lowered, so the status signals will become active. Why? Because address signals are from A0 to A19, and address bus is only from your AD0 to AD15, because we only have got a 16-bit address bus. So that sorry, data bus. So that data bus will become activated, and the remaining signals of the address line, they will be representing the status, right? So S3, S4, S5, S6 are the remaining signals. They will be telling you the status. S3, S4 will tell you whether your which segment is to be accessed, code segment, data segment, etc. inside the externally interfaced memory. Similarly, S4 and S5, they have got their own meanings in context of interrupt and acknowledging them, right? So DEN bar is also lowered to enable the transceiver. So DEN bar will be lowered in this state. Then read and write signals are also activated, so that the transceiver will get activated, right? So these signals are activated here, and then this AD0 to AD15 will go to high impedance state. I mean, when these status signals are activated, I mean, in the second T states, in the first state you have transferred the addresses. In the second states, apart from the data bus, the last four bits of the address lines, they will be representing the signal. But since here the activation work is going on for the transceiver, so whatever is there on this data bus will not be of any use to us. So it will be in the high impedance state. Data will be transferred in the third T state. I mean, after that transceiver buffer that you see here has been activated in the T2 state. After that, what will happen is your data will be transferred in the third T state, and insertion of some additional wait states can be also there if it is required. So this I will explain when I will show you the timing diagram. Then in T4 states, since the data transfer has been completed, the signals will be raised high. I mean, these signals will be deactivated, because read bar, when it is raised high, the read signal will be deactivated. Then this data enable will also be deactivated, and memory slash input output also will be it will be set for the next T1 cycle. I mean, in the next T1 cycle, if you want to read the input output device or the memory device, so that all can be taken care of in this stage only. Now let's come to the timing diagram, and let's see what happens there in the input read operation. So here you can see you have got these clock cycles, and this is the T1 state, T2 state, then T3 state, and T4 state. So when we begin, so you can see that when we begin from the T1 state, you can see that first of all, this ALE signal has been enabled, right? So this ALE signal becomes high in T1 state. So following that, what will happen is you also want to put your read signal as you also have this read signal which has got its some status, and we do not care about it in this T1 cycle, right? Similarly, you have got this DEN DT slash R signals. They have some of their statuses which we do not care here. And after that, this ALE signal has been enabled. The externally interface latches will latch the address onto that, and the address will be provided on this AD0 to AD15 as well as on this remaining pins, so that we have got this complete as address bus. So address is provided here. In the T2 cycle, since the address has been latched, now whatever you have on the data bus part is of no meaning to us, right? So in the T2 cycle, you can see that it is in the high impedance state. Whatever is the data on that is not useful for us, so it goes into the high impedance state. And however, the 4 bits, that is S3, S4, S5, S6, they will be present on the last 4 address bus bits, and that will output the status signals there. So we will know which segment we have to read and whether we have to interrupt, acknowledge something, etc. So those status lines will be provided there. Then this memory slash read signal, you can see that this read signal has been lowered in this T2 cycle, so that we will be able to know that we have to read something from the memory. And this DEN signal is also lowered in this T2, so that the transceiver has been activated. Now this DEN makes sense to us because after lowering this, the transceiver has been activated. After this, in the T3 cycle, on this AD0 to AD15, you have data. So you can see that there is this data, and the data will be read from the external memory onto these lines and taken inside the microprocessor. And in T4 cycle, you see the appropriate signals have been deactivated. So this is what happens there, right? In your read cycle. And for this memory slash input output pin, you can see that it has also been activated, so that memory will be activated because you want to read something from the externally interfaced memory. For the input reads operation is this, and after that, if you want to have this output operation, which is a write operation, the same sequence of operation will be there. The only point of difference will be in place of this read bar signal, you need to have this write bar signal, right? So this read bar signal is lowered. That means it has been activated here, but actually you need to have a write bar signal there in place of that, right? So after that, you have got this hold and HLDA timing signal. So sometimes it happens that some external devices, they request the control of internal buses of the microprocessor, right? So in that process, what you have to do is when the hold request is made, microprocessor acknowledges it by this HLDA. So this HLDA will be made high, and earlier 8086 was having the control of address bus, data bus, etc. So you can see that in this stage 8086 had the control, but when this hold request has been acknowledged, then at that time the requesting master, the external device which has requested the control, is called as requesting master. The control is given to that. When it finishes its task, then the control is written back to 8086 microprocessor. And one more important point to note in these timing diagrams is between this T3 and T4, there they have got a flexibility to introduce some additional bus cycles, right? Or additional T states. Why? Because you might have a peripheral device which is slower as compared to the microprocessor. So in that case, you might be needing some additional time to transfer the data, I mean, receive the data or give the data. So in that case, you might introduce some additional T states which are called as TW states. This is T1, T2, T3. Then you can have as many TW states as it is required. Then you will be having a T4 state. So here you can see that in this whole diagram that I have shown you, this is the way of implementing a TW state. So some TW states can be implemented anywhere if it is required. So that's how your this minimum mode system is configured and the timing diagram works. So this is the complete microcomputer system where you have got this microprocessor and these various chips which are not interfaced. A bigger version of this is your computer. If you see your motherboard, there will be a place for microprocessor, there will be a place for various integrated circuits there. So this is all about the minimum mode of microprocessor. In the next lecture, we are going to discuss the maximum mode of microprocessor. So Maximum mode is also not very different. The only point of difference there will be, instead of using these these meaning which are applicable for the minimum mode, we will be using these pins which are applicable for the maximum mode. And there will be multiple processors in the system, so that way also we can assemble our system. So we will see that in the next lecture. So I think this is it for this lecture. I will see you in the next video. Thank you.